Yo, what's up, everybody? This is your favorite crypto DJ, Mickey Crypto, and I'm here with the amazing Emily Loves Crypto, and we're here to talk about some pretty cool stuff she has going on in the Web3 space. And very happy to have you here. Thanks so much for taking the time. It's great to actually get to meet you face to face. I've been kind of following some of the stuff you have going on, and I like to try to keep up with interesting people. So I appreciate you coming on here.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me. It's always fun to see someone's face instead of profile pic, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I figure
And
it's a good way to let everybody see, what's going on. I know a lot of people don't like to be doxxed, but I'm one of the most doxxed people out there, and it's good to put a face to everything. But
Oh, I am so doxxed.
okay, awesome. So why don't we start by telling us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, how you got into crypto, and kind of what you have going on.
Yeah, you bet. So I'm Silicon Valley native, born and raised here. I never really went far. I went to UC Santa Cruz for my undergrad and majored in economics eventually, and then I kind of moved up the peninsula and was doing the startup hustle. In Santa Cruz, I did study abroad at London School of Economics. And then, once I was kind of out into the startup world, I was doing that, over and over again. And you learn a lot doing that. It's interesting how, the exact same role can change from organization to organization. And I think that's like, I don't know, the learning how to be flexible, learning how to adapt, even when like you think you know what you're doing, you get into a new environment and all the rules. So that's been, I guess, kind of an interesting component for myself. So I got in crypto in 2019. I think Ethereum was at like $600 at the time. And, kind of started CAing into it. It was one of those things that I had always wanted to get into, but, I'm pretty skeptical by nature and didn't really understand its value and why it was significant. To me, it was like, oh, it's like magic internet money with nothing to make it valuable and nothing to spend it on and nothing to create an economy around. So like that doesn't make a ton of sense. But as I started to learn about it, I'm like, oh no, having a currency that is socially accepted as opposed to like forced on you by the government actually does make a lot of sense. So as I got into that, I was kind of just, playing around on Coinbase, getting to learn about the different blockchains, but like that honestly confused me endlessly, especially I think because you're almost at a disadvantage if you start with a centralized exchange because it's not crypto at that point, right? Like you're not doing anything in a decentralized manner. They're like sitting there saying, "Oh yeah, different people like write these blocks and that's what makes it happen." And then I'm like, "But I'm using a centralized service. Like something is not clicking here and it doesn't make sense." So, over the next few months, I kind of got into more dexes, right? Understanding how a decentralized exchange works and automated market makers and things like Sushi Swap and Pancake Swap. And seeing how those really worked and what's a liquidity pool and how do all of these things work together and what's like what's a staking farm and what's the purpose of those and what are these DeFi protocols and what are they doing to see how a lot of these traditional banking processes had really been reinvented on the blockchain in a completely different way that focused on decentralization, and they still come with like absolutely enormous risks, especially at the time. I was messing around a lot on FTX because I was doing a lot with Solana and Solana's DeFi protocols. And the reason FTX was so appealing was because it allowed you to do things that you could do to stocks. Like, oh, I can short this coin that is, has a really high a farm APR, which doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Is whoever gets in early at some point, they're going to start exiting. And that's when the value of the coin tanks because people that are holding large amounts of it are going to sell their positions and it's going to go to zero. So like learning that firsthand was also super interesting to me. So in my journey of, learning about DEXs and DeFi and all that was going on, I was kind of like late to Ohm, but I came across a Binance shitcoin called CumRocket, which was an absolute meme coin, right? If you recall. And
Yes.
yeah, The journey of pro market was definitely an interesting one, but I guess long story short, I ended up as their head of product and helping them launch their adult content NFT marketplace. And that's really when I got into NFTs. I was trying to learn about NFTs, and how they work and how people trade them and why they might value them and what makes somebody want to buy an NFT, and all the things kind of associated with that. And it's interesting because you would think that there's kind of a natural fit to adult content, but there's a lot more complexity there, especially when it comes to the fact that, like, it's really the creator that wants to own their content. They don't necessarily want other people owning their content. That becomes problematic. So using a token gated approach or like a subscription approach makes a lot more sense, but that's like not what the mission was to begin with. And things got complicated there. So I moved on. Yeah, and then, over the holidays, I guess a couple years ago at this point, we had made a we had made like a silly project where we were just airdropping unburnable lumps of coal NFTs into scammer wallets to kind of like mark them as scammers. And then people thought it would be funny to like buy that and send it to their friends as well. So we upgraded that to having a whole little interface that allowed you to like buy this lump of coal and send it to someone. And then we added some additional functionality, like, at the time it was costing like, $80 to airdrop an ETH NFT. So we added some functionality, and so it was on Polygon. We added some functionality because Polygon NFTs go straight to your hidden folder on OpenSea that you could like tag somebody. Excuse me, you could like tag somebody on Twitter with their handle and say who it's from. And then we would like automate send a message. So they would get an alert from our account that said like, oh, someone sent you a greeting card. So we made it so you could combine images plus text. So it turned into like NFT greeting cards. And that was like kind of a fun little project that we did, and I don't know, it kind of fizzled out. It's still around if you want to mess with it. But yeah, that was just like a silly thing. Um, and then I like tried my first full-time job in crypto, working on a DAO, and we just like I just like didn't really get along with the founder. Imagine that I didn't get along with somebody. With the founders, and that was like short-lived. And maybe a month after that was over, my now partner, Squeebo, sent me a message, and he was like, hey, you know how people keep getting scammed? I fucking solved it. And I was like, how? What? Like, how did you solve the unsolvable? Like, I don't understand this. And he explained it to me, and I was like, holy shit, you fucking solved it. Like, that is incredible, right? Mind blown. And it was still very much the tail end of the bull market at that time. And it was hard to get devs to not be picking up like all the silly low hanging fruit of just like absolute slow rug contracts that were like, oh, I'll pay you $10,000 to copy paste this and put our special numbers in there, like add some funny function. Like, if you're an engineer, that is incredibly hard to turn down because it is absolute cake. So yeah, he was really into this, but also doing some stuff on the side as well to, pay the bills. And I was like, immediately recognized the potential there. And, we're an interesting partnership. Oh, you lost me. You still, I'm back. Hi.
Sorry.
It's an interesting partnership because my professional skill set is basically entirely around defining product market fit, bringing an MVP to market based on cost, and trying to get that product to scale. Right. On top of that, I'm like a small business owner, a couple times over. And, my partner, Squeebo, absolutely brilliant engineer, has been doing it for a long time. He started in the Marines. He calls it like busting packets, but I've come to understand he was literally like decrypting, enemy messages. So like, working on stuff like that. And then he kind of migrated into like full-time engineering type roles and has been doing that like ever since. And for myself, I've never been an engineer, but like I definitely am well practiced at bringing products to market. So we're like a pretty good fit in that. And like, he is incredibly talented and, has a lot of understanding around networking, and network architecture, which is more relevant to blockchain than I think a lot of Web 2 engineers really wrap their head around at first. So it's an interesting partnership. So we spent the summer filing our patent and getting that in order, mostly just to say we were here first, and then ever since, we've been, kind of testing the waters with our go-to-market model, with getting our, trying to get some sort of a customer base on board and coming up with our go-to-market strategy, and our financial strategy. And I guess like starting in November, really, we've been trying to get investors. So that's where we are right now. Our first product, which is the foolproof shadow token, has been delivered. Our second product, which is called a wallet snap, is deep in development right now. We're working on getting the front end on that so people are able to use it, along with the V2 of our dashboard, which comes with a lot of free security tools. So yeah, we are chugging along. That's kind of how I got here. Hopefully that was short enough. I don't know.
No, that was great, and I absolutely love that story because like you never know, like what you said with the Come Rocket project, that like sometimes some of these, really weird, meme-ish, crazy projects, like they have really good teams behind it. Not everything is a scam. Some things are just built for fun. I've been in the space since 2012 and seen all kinds of coins come and go, all kinds of projects, and I'm not really much of a developer myself, but as much as I wanted to believe for a long time that like all the rug pulls were just 100% scams, you slowly start to realize that stuff happens, and some of these
Yeah.
projects they don't intentionally, rug pull or do all these bad things. It's just there's some people trying to have fun doing something cool with some new technology, and it's just
Sometimes
there's a learning curve.
sometimes you just fail. Like, I don't
Yeah,
know, you can have like a
yeah,
great idea and a great team and awful luck. And like that's gonna cause you
100%.
to fail. Like, and I feel like it's a real disservice to people that are trying to innovate, to, accusing them of rug pulling when they couldn't make something work. And it's like, look, man, this is still capitalism. I still have to like pay my rent and feed my family. I can't just work for free forever. If it doesn't work and we run out of money, then it didn't work. We ran out of money. The same way that a business is gonna shut doors and shut down, like you have to be able to move on and try to innovate again, especially if you've had a lot of growth, and like, you have a lot of potential and a lot of good ideas. Like the toxic, like, discourage people from doing it is, I don't know, it's kind of bad. But at this, at the same time, when it comes to NFTs and someone comes to market and they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna like take a whole bunch of your money, and like I've raised 70 million and delivered nothing, like you have no excuse. That is a enormous amount of money. If you have a raise like that through through an NFT launch or something, then like, yeah, if you stop working, that's a rug. Like there's, that's just fraud, basically. But for someone who says like, oh, here's a free mint, and if community is our product, we can kind of product manage our way through this. And once we come up with a financial model that is compatible with capitalism, because we're still there, then like, yeah, work at it and like see what happens. I think that's pretty cool. I don't know. There's a lot of like weird kind of like aggro misnomers of this space where people get super upset with you if you can't like, come up with literal alchemy. Like I can't, like I'm not Rumpelstiltskin. I can't turn your straw into gold. This is bullshit. Like,
Right.
and like that's kind of the expectation here a lot of the time. And anyone that's like an actual professional looks at that and absolutely laughs. And I think that's part of why NFTs get a bad name. People have these like super unreasonable expectations. um I don't know. And at the same time, like it's important to understand, when you buy an NFT, you're buying the first unproven version of what's essentially a product. And there's a good chance that you yourself are the product, and that's just a way to identify you. So, I think there's a lot of like nuance here that people, are just like happier to not acknowledge, which is weird, but is what it is.
Right. No, absolutely. And it's funny you say that because I work with this group called Web3 Texas. So one thing that they always kind of bring up is that like if the product is free, then you are the product. Which,
Yeah.
for a lot of times is very, very true. And I think even when you mentioned, why you and your partner work very well, especially like having the networking and net marketing side, is that I think a lot of projects, they don't have a business mind or a business aspect. They jump into some things. They're like, oh, like you said, oh, we raised a bunch of money, but now what do we do? Because we don't actually know how to properly maintain a real business or how to network and how to market. And
Or let alone
it's
have a
important.
business model. Like,
Right.
so many
Exactly.
of them are just like on the fast track of like cash burning. They're like literally shoving it into a furnace because they're like, we don't know what to do. Let's just burn it all. Right? Like it's
Yep.
crazy. It's crazy to me,
Yeah.
especially kind of money because like you can do almost anything and profit. You just have to like do the thingy. And like
Right.
none of them are like taking that step. It's so bizarre. And I think a lot of it has to do with you know, the vagueness around like what you're allowed to do. And kind of like the SEC boogeyman and like,
Yeah.
you know, understanding like you know, what do you need to do to legitimize your crowdfunded raise? Like a lot of people don't realize that you can, with a very small amount of DD, and you know, sharing that out to people, you can legitimately raise like 1.07 million dollars through a Kickstarter campaign and be completely compliant. You just need to collect a certain amount of information, and people have this like, I don't know, weird obsession with being anonymous, and it's like, I don't know, good
Right.
luck if you want the space to grow. If you wanted to stay anonymous, like we still live in countries that will get their cut one way or another.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
I
Yeah,
don't
I think the whole anonymity thing is just misconstrued, you know, especially when people are like, "Oh, privacy this, privacy that." It's like, well, the privacy aspect of it is more important for people who live in countries where like it actually affects their way of living or like, you know, their very lives, you know what I mean? Like in countries where if you do certain things and the government finds out, they'll throw you in prison or kill you. And so,
yeah.
like, for them, it's important to maintain a level of privacy. Not for everybody. You know, everybody doesn't have to be on private blockchains. Everybody doesn't have to be anonymous because, like, how are you going to buy a house? You know, being anonymous. You know what I mean? How are you going to do certain things, like you said, in this world where you have to have? You know, people freak out about the KYC thing, and it's like it's important as a business to know who you're dealing with because if not, you mess with the wrong person, your business will suffer for it. And you
Yeah,
know, there's lots of
sanctions
money and
and like
yeah,
not
there's so much
breaking
at stake.
health, like there's
100%.
there's a whole bunch of reasons that like you need to do that, and there's also a whole bunch of ways to do that and maintain privacy. Like there's tons of private individuals out there that are, you know, running enterprises that don't actually ever expose themselves or their family. Like there's ways to do it, and like the thing is, without enough information on the blockchain, you're going to run into trouble and it's going to cost you a lot of money. And do you have the money to support your desire to remain private, or is it better to just do it in the open, right? And like you
Right.
know, to me, I like the blockchain not because of the privacy element but because of the transparency. And I
Yep.
think transparency is really key. I mean, there's a misnomer about blockchain being entirely transparent. People are like, oh, I just like go look that up on Etherscan. It's like, bruh, Etherscan is like a micro subset of the information that goes across the blockchain. If you don't know how to directly query the blockchain, you're getting some like weird, I don't know, slice of information that is not
Right.
the full picture. Plus, you know, it doesn't come with context. There aren't notes in there that's like, oh yeah, Emily sent this to her friend because she owed the money for dinner that one night. And then people look at it and they're like, you paid an influencer. And I'm like, influencer paid for my dinner and I want to pay them back. Like, you
Right.
know, I don't know. It's kind of funny like that.
It really is.
Yeah.
So how would you say, you know, your project Foolproof kind of differs from other projects that exist that are kind of trying to do same thing?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I would say like a huge differentiating factor of Foolproof is that we're building our solutions based on the architecture of Web3. And a lot of companies that come in here, including some of the major providers like Infura and Alchemy, are building based on the principles of Web2. And the thing about that is you can overcome it with Web3. And that is ultimately going to be their Achilles heel, right? So, like, you'll see a lot of security products out there that are like, we're a browser extension. And it's like, okay, but like, what happens when someone comes up with a legitimate Web3 native internet browser? And internet is kind of like web agnostic, right? Like, the concept of the internet is neither Web 1, Web 2, or Web 3, it's the internet. So, when
Mhm.
someone comes up with a browser that's Web3 native, then a browser extension, a browser plugin doesn't make sense anymore because that's coming from a centralized location. And centralizing information is diametrically opposed to the architecture of Web3. Web3 relies entirely on decentralization. You can't write a block to the blockchain without it being verified by multiple validators. And that's how it works in every single blockchain. But if someone comes in and says, like, oh, yeah, we're going to provide you security in the Web2 way, like that should be a red flag, right? Like they're never going to really provide you security. They're going to maybe give you a warning or like maybe tell you that like, oh, this is a bad idea. Let's not do that, right? But like they're not going to be able to protect you. And I think that's an absolute inherent difference. Like, and I'm not knocking those products. They're a step in the right direction. People do need more transparency in what they're doing. People need these intermediary tools to help them survive. If all of the money goes into the pockets of scammers, there's no participants left. There's no builders left. It's all in the scammers' hands. And like now the scammers are stuck with what? No one to steal from, right?
Right.
And like ultimately, I don't want the scammers stealing from people, but they can very well end the space with their greed. And this is something that we've seen before, right? The better that they get at scamming, the better they get at stealing, the less accountability people want to take because they feel like it's unsafe. They're going to start turning around and be like, no, just put my money back in the bank. The bank will protect me. That's safe, right? Instead of self-custody, which
Yeah.
has a lot of accountability, but also, because of the lack of transparency, it creates these kind of scary situations where you like go to sign a transaction. You're like, I don't know what's going to happen. This could be bad. Like, and the ability to expose that to someone is a huge value. And that's part of what we do at Foolproof.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it's crazy how, with so much history behind the banking systems and like, repeated, things that they've done, as a failures or things they've done wrong, like people still willing to trust because, it's an only option. And, I think it's important to have things like Foolproof Lab to be able to get more people fully onboarded and trusted into Web3 space, just because a lot of people don't really know what they're doing. They
Yeah,
still in that mentality of let's just trust this entity because it's there and it's convenient. And so we're
yeah.
gonna use it and do it.
People tend to forget that like this is trustless and it needs to be trustless.
Yep.
There is no trust me, I'm your friend. Like that's gone. Don't trust like asking someone to trust you is like the biggest no-no. And then
Right.
asking someone to trust a transaction is like even more egregious. Like you're literally training people in the wrong direction now. Like I don't want to trust whatever. Like that's the whole reason I'm here.
Yeah.
I want to know that when things leave my wallet, it's with my consent. And it's hard to argue right now that you're able to fully give consent because who can read a hash transaction? Like very few
Right.
people here are able to look at that and be like, oh, this is bad, right? And by saying you must be able to read that, all you're doing is forcing this space not to grow because people look at it and they're like, I can't do that. I'm just going to stick to my credit card. Right.
Yep.
And then they miss out on all of the really cool opportunities that something like decentralized user management or a borderless economy can provide. And the experience that those things are able to provide is a lot more interesting to me. And I think it's a lot more interesting to a lot of people. They just don't necessarily, one, understand how to articulate it, and two, understand that it really is possible.
Right. Absolutely. And it's definitely, a step. I mean, we definitely need those steps in between to self custody, and I think that's the thing is that people don't realize how empowering it really is to be in this space because the biggest benefit is the peer to peer interactions, and we see stuff happening like with FTX and all this craziness and people freaking out, and it's like, well, the power really lies in us really engaging with each other. You really actually knowing what you're doing and having the self custody over your wallet, over your NFTs, and interacting with people and businesses on a one to one level. And so that way, like, hey, this is what's happening because I understand this technology to a sense that I know that I can engage with this person because I own these things and I know what's going on and I can choose, where to support or where to buy or, what to do. And we see all this madness because people freak out because they don't really understand that they just are so used to the system that exists now that, I think it'll be a little bit before we get there, but I like that. I like that. You're moving in that direction. You have things going on because there are very few projects that understand that. Because, like you said earlier, they're kind of still in the bed of like, hey, let's kind of stick to these old ways and just have familiarity and be get people comfortable, but like we don't really have the full spectrum of Web3 security, or we don't even really understand ourselves the full spectrum of Web3 security.
Yeah,
So
and
what Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, interestingly enough, like FTX is guilty of the same thing that every bank in America is guilty of, and that's basically counterfeiting money. And then they were like trading it around like a stock market does, or like how Wall Street does, and then they collapsed because there was no one there to bail them out. And it's like, oh, we've seen this one before. This has
Yeah,
nothing to do with crypto. This is just the same old bullshit that Wall Street likes to do. And like, that's what happens when you get a lot of money. Money is power. Like that's undeniable.
yeah,
That's a reality. That's a reality of capitalism in America and just kind of Western society overall. But like the thing that kind of disappoints me about NFT projects right now is just how forcibly centralized they are. Like
right.
they even the holders have this expectation of centralization, right? Where it's
Mhm.
like, effectively you're just like selling JPEGs on the blockchain. Like that's not what NFTs are meant to do.
Right.
That's not like the cool thing about the blockchain. That's just like, oh, I have a picture on the blockchain and I can trade it and that's fun. Like, no, that's like kind of fun for a minute. And like, so you can like socialize with the same people, but like, there isn't even an easy way right now for me to connect with people that hold the same thing, right? And if I'm looking for people that are also interested in, JPEGs of frogs, then like that's not an easy bridge for me to build right now, right? I'm limited to these Web 2 tools that are not designed for this. I'm limited to things like Twitter and Discord and like they kind of
Right.
suck. Um,
Yeah.
so, as we see people really starting to take advantage of the cool stuff that you can do with Web3, it's going to get a whole lot more interesting. Um, if someone's really saying, here's how you connect with the other people that have collected this thing, here's how you connect with the artist, and using the blockchain to serve that up instead of being like, oh, now I need to go find them on OpenSea. Where's their Discord? Let me pop in and verify. Like that whole pattern is just like really a strong misunderstanding of the power of the tools that we have at hand. I had like posted this really silly meme that I had found on Reddit the other day. And it's like of Spider-Man talking to this like pterodactyl monster. And like this, this pterodactyl monster is like, I guess has like the power to change the human genome. So he's been running around, turning people into dinosaurs. And
Oh my God.
Spider-Man's like, you can literally cure cancer and you're turning people into dinosaurs. He's like, because I want to. And I felt like that's just so relevant to what's going on with NFTs right now, where it's like you have the entire blockchain at your hands.
Yeah.
You have the power of
Yeah.
decentralized currency, decentralized data. You have content and data management. You have decentralized user management. You have built-in workflows. You have built-in log. You have services that are coming up that are creating relational databases. Like you have a really freaking cool tool set, all run by the power of this blockchain that you've chosen, and all you need is a little bit of that coin to start moving around and you can do really really cool stuff. And they're like, I'm going to turn people into dinosaurs. Like,
That's
okay.
Oh my God, I love that comparison because I mean you're exactly right, and that's one thing that I've been kind of trying to talk to different projects and just people in general about whenever I have the opportunity is especially with what has happened recently is that we need to take a step back because so many people after 2017, but specifically after 2021 when NFTs got their big boom, they only know about that space. They only know about NFTs, but they don't really understand like, oh, hey, like the whole bread and butter is the blockchain. You know what I mean? Like all these things evolve from there, and that's where there's really a lot of power. And so, it's just a matter of taking a step back and really looking at the technology, not looking at the dollar signs, not looking what's going on in these markets, looking at the technology. And because despite what happened at FTX, well, guess what? The smart contracts are still working, these blockchains are still transacting, and even with the meme NFTs, they're still moving, like the tech is still solid, it's
and
just a matter of really understanding and looking at what matters.
And if you're here to be a day trader, and like there's people that are day traders in stocks as well, FTX had a nice tool set. Like they did a
Mhm.
lot of bad stuff. Like I'm not going to say they didn't do bad stuff with all of this money they were collecting, but ultimately, like those types of tool sets that they had were providing a lot of liquidity to the market and creating a lot of the foundational elements that, keep things like America moving, right? So, losing that tool set is kind of a bummer. And there's obviously other exchanges out there that are providing similar things. I just found it an extremely comfortable tool set to use.
Mhm.
It's just too bad that they, thought that they could steal people's money and degen bet it out onto other stuff and then like make really bad degen bets and not really understand that they need to, return that money. Like, and,
Right.
ultimately that's what banks do too, right? Like banks absolutely do that too. They just do a lot more, credit checking and there's a lot more regulation involved. And we've seen them get in trouble for that multiple
Mhm.
times. So, I don't know. There's absolutely, a need for that in the space, but there's also, a need for morals.
Right.
Like just because you can doesn't mean you should. And just because you don't think it's going to hurt you personally doesn't mean that like ruining the lives of millions of people is an acceptable thing to do. And I think that kind of brings us full circle to the trustless nature of the blockchain. Like I shouldn't have to trust that a centralized exchange is going to do what they say they're going to do. That's the beauty of self custody.
Yeah.
In providing these services through something like a DEX, right, through a decentralized exchange, is really valuable. We, of course, need fiat on ramp and off ramp. And we, of course, also want ways that make these trades easy to make, right? Like I want to be able to shorten long coins. I want to be able to shorten long NFTs. I want to
Yeah.
be able to like schedule my ease in and ease out of stuff too. Like that's, and I want that type of data. Like all of those things are useful to anybody that's trying to grow in the space, especially if you're trying to like get a little bit more capital to use. So yeah, it's an interesting one for sure. But at the same time, like they absolutely needed to have been made an example of, and it pulled an enormous amount of liquidity out of the market, and they were really defrauding an enormous amount of the population, which is
Right.
like absolutely terrible because it's not allowing the technology to grow. And the fact of the matter is that blockchain technology provides technology that we don't currently have access to in Web 2. Like this whole concept of, oh, I can own my login. I'm not in trouble when someone goes and, manages to hack through whatever Google's storing my username and password in. And I happen to have chosen to use Google for single sign on for like every other service because that made it easy. Now every, 172 services that I had signed up for with my Google username are exposed, and I have to go one by one changing all my passwords to something unique so they don't get easily exploited, right? Like this is just it's a
Man.
nightmare scenario. And people look at it and they're like, "Oh, blockchain's so hard, self-custody so hard." And it's like, is it that hard?
Yeah.
Because like entering my entire home address, a 16-digit credit card number, my CVV, and my expiration date every time I try to buy something online is also very hard. It's a
Right.
lot easier for me to just sign a smart contract transaction that has like, some element of my data hidden. So I feel like there's a lot of kind of weird narratives out there that people aren't looking at beyond like that top layer, and it just makes them look a little bit silly, like when you start to ask questions.
No, absolutely. So with foolproof, what are some challenges you guys have faced, when building this out, and what are some ways that you found to kind of overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest challenge that we face is that most people participating in blockchain don't understand how the blockchain works. Um,
Right.
and they may be like, "Oh yeah, so like a bunch of people validate the transaction, and then it gets put onto a block, and then those blocks added together is blockchain." So like, yeah, that's yes, that is correct. But it's just not that simple, right? Like it didn't get to where it is because of that kind of simplicity. There's a lot of different things that go on. There's a lot of kind of order of operations that goes on, and a lot of stuff that's changed and is completely different from Web 2. So a lot of people here making Web 2 assumptions, and you come at them and you say, "Oh no, here's how you solve it for Web 3." And they're like, "But Web 2, easy. I know
Mm.
this." And you're like, "But it's not going to work Web 3." Um and like getting people to understand that, or why that's important, or why like maybe that, the easiest thing for them to wrap their head around the first time that they're told it is not necessarily the best thing, like that's absolutely a challenge. So it's even affected our roadmap, right? Like
Mhm.
initially I was planning on delivering our most robust and coolest features first, but people weren't understanding it. So we kind of took a step back and we're like, okay, like what if we deliver this, what we think is like a simpler feature first, and try to get people to wrap their heads around it. And people have still absolutely struggled to understand why something like, the shadow token is providing security and value. Like they don't understand that you shouldn't walk around with your life savings in your front pocket when you go out to the club on a Friday night. Like
Yeah.
that's not what you should do. You should walk around with, $20 and then like this receipt that proves you're the owner of something. Like that
Yeah.
makes sense, especially if they can't steal that proof. And like, token gating is decentralized user management, and getting people to understand, even with the concept of user management, which to me, like I spent, over 5 years of my career only working on user management and, dynamic access control and just kind of like these things that people are like, oh, I've never heard of user management before. If you've never been a system admin, yeah, you've never heard of it. You've never really thought of it like this way, right? But every time that you log in with a username and a password, that's user management. The service you're connecting to is managing your experience. You are one of their users, and they're going to give you things like permissions, right? And those permissions may be access to my mailbox, or it may be access to premium features because I paid for the upgrade, or it may be, a certain type of service, right? Like there's all sorts of things that are happening in there that people don't even consider when it comes to their experience. So it's hard to reframe these differences for people and to get them to really understand, like, what is this value, especially because it's so hypothetical right now until it's adopted at a large scale. I can only
Right.
describe what their end user experience is going to be, and I have to give them examples that they can wrap their head around without talking about something like, for me, at least from like the perspective of a product manager, or the perspective of like an engineer. I have to teach them like, oh, this will make my online shopping experience feel more comfortable and be more customized. And now Facebook and Google are spying, are not getting any value for what they're spying on me for. And then people start to be like, oh, okay, but like, why don't I want them spying on me? And it's like, I don't know. Do you like being served ads for things that you thought you were searching from in the privacy of your own home? And all of a
Yeah.
sudden someone's sitting over your shoulder and they're like, oh, you want that? Why is that in your profile? Why do you want that? And like having, this concept of decentralized user management, one, allows me to make my own profile, right? Like it's not, oh, Google thinks that you're a woman between the ages of 30 and 40 and have a child and you live in this area and, lean towards X style and consume this type of food, right? And like have these types of experiences that you're interested in, right? Like they profile you. You can go look up your profile and it is
Yeah.
weird. Because that's how they segment ads, right? As opposed to that, I can go and I can define what I want to be. I can say, this is like Emily's hobby wallet, or I can go and say, this is Emily's like travel focused wallet, right? And I can
Yeah.
like take those NFTs and use them as a way to build my profile. And that's going to give me special access to wherever I go. And I have the ultimate control over what you think I look like. Right? If I don't want to be bombarded with gaming stuff one day, I just want to look for like recipes, then like
Yeah.
I can change what that looks like when I go and navigate around the internet. And I think as people start to really wrap their head around that, it's going to make sense. I mean, I guess to really like put the nail in the coffin on that one, not too long ago, I did a little bit of research and I was like, oh, okay, like let's figure out how much money Facebook and Instagram makes off like grandma. And it's something like $180 a year, which is like money that could help grandma. And then it's like, okay, what if it's an influencer that has like 10,000 followers? And like at that point, it's like $10 to $20 a post. And then if
Wow.
it's an influencer with 100,000 followers, it's like it replicates, but it's like there is an additional element on there. It's like, oh, $300 to $400 a post that I post something. Instagram and Facebook get to make $300 or $400 off the ad revenue that I provided for them by creating an information, like an interesting post for my followers to look at. They were able to sell an equivalent in ads for that much money. And then when you get it to like 1 million, it's wild. It's like $800 every time that I post a stupid selfie. They made $800 and I made nothing. And you look at that and you're like, what?
Crazy.
That is awful. Like, how can you take such enormous share? And it's like these microtransactions that people just don't get how much they're giving away. And in a world where, it's harder to get a job, it's harder to rent a place, it's harder to get savings, it's harder to pay for all this stuff. Inflation is absolutely rampant. And you have these giants just leeching off of you and your personality and your creativity and your life. They literally own those pictures. Like once people start to wrap their head around it, they're like, oh, I don't like this. What is the other answer? And the other answer is blockchain.
Yeah. That's interesting. No, that's really crazy. I didn't realize it was like that. I mean, I knew they were able to make money like that, but excuse me. But that's absolutely insane. And I mean, I like the profile, how you talked about, because I think that's going to be, very important. So yeah, we can kind of start to wrap things up. I know you're a little pressed for time. I guess we'll end just with these last couple questions. If you want to, you know, talk about, you said you have some changes in your roadmap. So if there's any exciting updates or anything you want to, that the community should be looking out for, definitely let us know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the shadow token, like I kind of described before, allows you to separate utility from asset. And like we said, token gating is really the foundational elements of decentralized user management. Like token gating is the best way for an NFT project to offer something special to their holders. The original version of that was like, oh, they're going to airdrop you some stuff, right? But like the evolution has been token gating. Oh, you get special access to merch, to events, to allow list, to whatever they're doing, games that you can earn prizes on, right? Like all of those things. So the shadow token allows you to separate the utility from the asset itself. And it has to be done on the contract level. Like you can't make a singular shadow token. You have to make a shadow token for an entire collection. And it's true to the principles of decentralization, right? Like anybody can deploy the shadow token, but it's not actually effective until the project comes in and says, oh, now we're going to look at the shadow token to prove it's you. We're not going to look at the original contract address. But I think the expectation should be, why would a project ever ask me to potentially sacrifice the entire contents of my wallet when they don't have to, right? So it's a different solution to the same problem that something like Delegate Wallet or Warm XYZ is solving, but those are very complex and require a lot of maintenance on behalf of the project themselves. Like every time they launch a new experience, they have to go and do this kind of ridiculous protocol. And it really disrupts the user experience where like you can't just connect from a wallet. You're like, I'm going to connect with my Delegate wallet. I'm going to connect with my Warm wallet. I'm going to connect with my regular wallet, right? Like all these different things. The shadow token is literally just a swap out. Like it is a ERC 721 or 1155 or ERC 20. So it's interesting in that regard. And that has a lot of like cool functionality coming. So that's what's live now. And we're really hoping to get projects to understand that they should never ask you to connect with the original contract address. Like that is bad. That is dangerous. Oh, my dogs are so rude. That's dangerous. Don't encourage risky behaviors. Encourage
Right.
safe behaviors because we want to be here. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. It's tricky. It's tricky to get across. Like I don't know. It seems to me it's like frustratingly simple, and to them they're like, well,
Yeah.
I don't know about this safety, security. Why would that's their responsibility. And it's like, well, I mean, sort of. You're asking them to do this in an unsecure way, so like I don't know. It's a tricky one. Yeah, and the next product we have is really about it's the foundational framework of like our full product suite. So that one, I think we can talk about another time, but it's effectively like, how do you evacuate your assets if they're at risk? So that's what we're solving for. Yeah, and then ultimately like protecting your transactions before they hit the actual blockchain. So those are all coming really soon here.
No, that sounds awesome, and I really appreciate your time. So you guys heard it here, foolproof slab. Most important thing, security, self-custody, and blockchain,
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing, people will start to realize it, because things like this past market failure and all this craziness, people are going to look at, okay, how can we effectively and safely engage in this space? So thank you, Emily, so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This was great. Definitely love to have you back, and keep up with your updates and see what's going on, because people have to know this and they have to understand it. And I think it's important to have these conversations so they can realize, like, oh shit, we didn't even know that we should know about this or care about this. But it's like,
Right.
this is number one. This is the most baseline thing you should care about and know about.
Yeah, I
But
mean, overall, use 3 wallets. You have a burner, you have a vault, and you have a sales wallet, and that's going to keep you safer than so many other things. But yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. You guys check her out on Twitter. Be sure to go to Foolproof Labs and check them out. And yeah, we'll see you again next time. Thank
See
you so
ya.
much. Have a good one.
Bye.